This edition of Monocle on Saturday was first broadcast on the 20th of July, 2024. Hello, I'm Georgina Godwin, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. This is Monocle on Saturday. And coming up on today's programme, we'll have a look through the week's news and culture with journalist and geopolitics specialist Latika Bourke. Then we're joined by the co-founder of Scorpios Mykonos, Thomas Heyne, to talk about their cultural arts programme Encounters, featuring artworks, video installations and live performances. That's all ahead here on Monocle on Saturday. First though, here's the news. Services from airlines to healthcare, shipping and finance are coming back online after an update that US cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike pushed to its clients early on Friday morning, which conflicted with Microsoft Windows operating system, rendering devices around the world inoperable. Companies are now dealing with backlogs of delayed and cancelled flights and medical appointments, missed orders and other issues that could take days to resolve. Businesses also face questions about how to avoid future blackouts triggered by technology meant to safeguard their systems. A Russian court found US reporter Evan Gersovich guilty of espionage on Friday and sentenced him to 16 years in a maximum security penal colony in what his employer, the Wall Street Journal, called a disgraceful sham conviction. He was the first US journalist accused of spying in Russia since the Cold War, and his arrest in March 2023 prompted many US and other Western correspondents to leave Moscow. And a US plan to use Japanese factories to boost production of Patriot air defense missiles used by Ukraine to defend against Russian attacks is being delayed by a shortage of critical components manufactured by Boeing, according to a Reuters report. The US hopes to increase production from about 500 a year to more than 750 globally as soon as possible. But no expansion at all will be possible in Japan without additional supplies of the missile's seekers, which guide them in the final stages of flight. And that's your Monocle Radio News. Hello and welcome to Monocle on Saturday, and a big welcome too to journalist and geopolitics expert Latika Bourke.
Good morning, Georgina.
How are you doing?
It's lovely to see you.
It's lovely to see you, and I must tell you, I've been really enjoying your Substack.
Oh, thank you.
Tell us about it.
Well, you can find it at latikambirk.com. It's very fun. Actually, I enjoyed it a lot. I'm writing for an Australian publication, and I'm also writing for, I guess, myself, but really for you if you're interested. And it's very fun because it's allowing me to write about all the things I know and I'm interested in that don't necessarily always engage an Australian audience. And that's a lot of European politics, a lot of China-focused stuff. And every Friday I put out a reading list of what I've been reading. And that's actually a fun little roundup of some of the quirkiest stories on the internet that don't necessarily warrant a full post. But it is really fun. And I've started my own podcast, which is also exciting.
Really? What's the podcast?
It's a lot of work, but it's very good. I seem to sleep about 4 hours a day now. And it's called Bourke and Ryan, which is after me, of course, and my co-host Mick Ryan, who's a retired Major General in Australia. And we talk about national security, innovations in warfare, which is his pet subject. And we've been getting lots of interesting guests on lately. And the guest that we'll have on in the episode tomorrow is one of my good friends, a former High Commissioner for Australia to the UK, George Brandis. But he also served, interestingly, as the Attorney General in Australia when we were going through our big foreign interference scandal. So it's a good conversation about actually how Australia tried to safeguard its democracy by coming up with what were quite creative laws at the time, establishing a foreign interference transparency scheme and a register, which has since been copied by the United Kingdom. And actually, Australia had a lot of input into the drafting of that legislation here. And he told me that the whole idea when he was conceptualising these laws was actually to come up with something that could be adopted by the entire Five Eyes. And over the last 2 years, we've seen Canada grapple with exactly the same issues Australia was grappling with, say, 8 or 7 years ago, where we were exposing very widespread penetration of Chinese, particularly foreign interference, in our electoral system and in our democracy. So it was a bit of ahead of the time, and it's a great conversation. Anyway, if you want to listen, you can find it at www.latika.m.Bourke, and that's a Bourke.
What's the M for?
It's a mystery.
Latika Mystery Bourke.
Yes, quite.
Well, given that you're doing all that, I wonder if you've had time to do anything else this week.
Well, actually, yesterday was a very fun day because I feel very sorry for everybody who suffered from the IT outage, which we'll get to a bit later, Georgina. But I wandered off down to Swindon, or Wiltshire, I guess, to the to RIAT, which is the Royal International Air Tattoo. Have you ever been?
I have not.
Okay, I was not expecting to enjoy it, and I was a little bit reluctant about whether it was even kind of worth my time and bother, but I received a very lovely invitation from a friend of mine who works for a defence company. And I have to say, it was absolutely fantastic. So the red arrows, do you know these? Yep. Okay, so these are the little planes that do the formations on King's birthday, Dripping the Colour, the coronation, although remember, of course, last coronation, it got rained out a bit. Well, they put on, I would say, 15 to 20 minutes of spectacular manoeuvres. And the best thing about it was actually it was a bit like a kind of a show or a fair or a carnival when I was growing up. And you could hear, you know, those old school speakers where the sound kind of echoes around the fairground. It was a bit like that. And there was the most geeky, wonderfully nerdy narrator who just knew the ins and outs of every single pilot, every single plane, the manoeuvres, the numbers, the names, the history, who'd led these squadrons in years gone by. And he did the most wonderful narration as he was telling you exactly where to look, why to look, what that meant, what they were feeling inside, the velocity of them going up almost vertical. It was absolutely fantastic. And I really, really loved it.
It sounds amazing. And of course, the Farnborough Air Show is on too.
Well, everyone's now been saying if you enjoyed this, you must go to Farnborough. But I can't say, Georgina, I imagined my life would be an air show junkie, but maybe.
And I think tomorrow on the Globe List we'll be speaking to Murdo Morrison, who is, of course, one of our go-to people for all matters aviation, all about Farnborough. What are you up to tonight?
Okay, well, before I get to tonight, it's more what I'm doing this afternoon, which is I'm going to a particular part of London where they offer these services, and I'm going to get my hair done in tiny little braids because tonight I'm going to a 40th party and the dress code is 90s hip-hop and R&B. Now, Georgina, I was born in 1984, so this is obviously my generation, and I spent basically most of my late teens thinking I was either going to be the fourth member of Destiny's Child or...
I'm not laughing.
You may laugh, it's fine. Or Alicia Keys 2.0. So tonight I'm going to revive, and I think I've actually still got all my original clothes.
Fantastic.
I'm going to get out the clothes I wore when I was 17. I've even got a hat that I bought from Topshop when Alicia Keys was huge in the 2000s, 2002 this was, and I'm going to wear that tonight, and I'm actually going to recreate my hairstyle that I had when I was 17, 18.
Fantastic.
So there you go.
That puts my evening into kind of, I'm just boring you. We have these sort of regular salons where we invite various writers around and things. And tonight the sort of main guest is a former American diplomat who I shan't name. But we are having marinated salmon, and the salmon has been marinating for a couple of days.
What did you marinate it in?
I can't tell you. My partner did it.
Oh, Georgina. I think this is the magic combination. You invite the fun guests, they do all the catering.
Exactly. It works so well. I can't tell you.
Well, I'll look forward to my invitation next week.
Now, listen, what a big week in US politics.
Look, there's really only one story that will dominate for the rest of this year, I think. And I guess it really all started with a debate where Joe Biden gets up and finally all the covers come off and we see what has been pretty much concealed from us despite a lot of concerns, and that is this president is not capable of, at times, even getting full sentences out. whatever his policy ambitions are and goals are and his agenda is, it's going to be swept away by the fact that he cannot communicate any of it. And then we fast forward to last Saturday night. I mean, where were you when this happened? It is one of those where were you moments when you found out somebody tried to assassinate Donald Trump.
So here's the thing. And I'm sorry because it makes me sound like the most boring person in the world. I was A, awake, B, sober, and C, watching CNN.
Okay, I was 2 of those 3, but I happened to be in bed just about to put the phone down and scrolling Twitter as you do before you go to sleep, and that's when it popped up.
Yeah, it was extraordinary for me watching this happen live, and of course I knew I was on air early the next morning, kind of tweeting people going, can you be available first thing in the morning? We've got to talk to you, trying to find out what was going on. It was extraordinary. So that whole thing happens, right? But then what it does is very much influence his speech and the reaction to him. So let's have a reminder. Here are some highlights from the speech that Donald Trump gave.
There was blood pouring everywhere, and yet, in a certain way, I felt very safe because I had God on my side. I felt that. Our opponents inherited a world at peace and turned it into a planet of war. We're in a planet of war. Look at that attack on Israel. Look at what's happening with Ukraine. The cities are just bombed out. How can people live like that where buildings, massive buildings are falling to the ground? And the entire world, I tell you this, we want our hostages back, and they better be back before I assume office, or you will be paying a very big price. I will end every single international crisis that the current administration has created, including the horrible war with Russia and Ukraine, which would have never happened if I was president, and the war caused by the attack on Israel, which would have never happened if I was president.
I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't so very, very alarming.
I think what was most interesting about the RNC this week was that this has been an extraordinary moment for the Trump campaign to pivot, to try and present itself as something remotely passable to swing voters who have January 6th deep in their minds. They know and believe Joe Biden and the Democrats when they say Trump will actually be a threat to some of the institutions and try and challenge the things that shore up our democracy. Now, the Trump campaign very cleverly, I think, used the assassination attempt to try and pin that on the Democrats, not Trump himself, and this is critical, not Trump or Melania Trump, but many of Trump's supporters. And J.D. Vance is a good example of this, twinning this attack straight to Biden and trying to say, look, this is the Democrats who've made Trump a hate figure. This is the president who said in a briefing call, we need to put Trump in bullseye. Obviously not literally, but of course, very unfortunate language to use in a culture like America. And what Trump did was come in and give a very evocative speech, as we've heard some snippets of there, Georgina, as he describes the feeling of almost being assassinated. And it's not something you hear. Past presidents who've had assassination attempts against them have not really, if you look back in history, gone into such detail about it. So this is Trump's moment. It is very fascinating as he tells people his first-hand experience. But I don't know if you watched the full speech. It was 90 minutes, and it very quickly got very boring after that, which for Trump is actually one of the worst sins you can commit, because he has a very adoring, if not quasi-evangelical crowd, and I use that word very deliberately.
Well, it's messianic, really.
And even they were getting bored by the end of this speech. The other really interesting thing that happened in this speech is every time Trump went off script, he made mistakes and violated his own rules that his team around him have been trying to put in place. Don't attack Biden. Don't insult Nancy Pelosi. Let's try and present this new, likeable, softened Trump. And what Trump showed and reminded us was that, no, Trump is always Trump. And the glimpses that he provided in that speech show that whatever has happened in the last week, and I think he does seem very genuinely affected by it, how he governs is going to be exactly how he always intended to govern pre that assassination attempt. And I think you have to look at no clearer act from Trump, not his words, his act, than his selection of J.D. Vance.
So I want to jump in here and tell you something about J.D. Vance. I've been reading his book.
This is on my list. What is it like?
Hillbilly Elegy. It's very good. And the thing is about it, for the first time in my life, I understand why people might vote for Trump. Mm-hmm. He describes this sort of hillbilly community, Kentucky, rural Kentucky, where it is really a different way of life. And you can see why people like that might resent people like us. Mm-hmm. And I use those words, us and them, very deliberately, because that is how they see this. This is a very stark divide. These are lives that we don't really have an insight into. And although he's promising them stuff that he doesn't necessarily or hasn't necessarily delivered, he's saying the things they want to hear. Keep your guns. We'll give you jobs again. We'll make sure that you're equal. Let's get rid of all of these people who think that they're better than you. All of that stuff. And it really made me understand.
So you would recommend?
Oh, absolutely read
Great,
it.
because this is on my list.
So now, one of the other things that that obviously Trump and Vance remind us of is Georgia Maloney, because we are talking about populism here, and she is obviously an enormously she's a populist leader. Really funny story about her this week.
I mean, Maloney fascinates me because if she was a left-wing female leader, you would have most of the media in absolute awe of this woman. When she is on the world stage, she takes command, she dominates every single picture opportunity, whether it's the grasping of the hands, the rolling of the eyes, the expressive facial expressions.
The juggling of melons in front of her chest.
Absolutely. Maloney is a figure that is really someone you take notice of, and in a good way for Italy particularly. But she does seem to harbour a lot of sensitivities and some worrying trends that people have held about her. And one of these examples is an independent journalist a couple of years ago gets on Twitter. This is when Maloney is opposition leader, and makes what has been a very common comparison amongst the global media and in Italy as well, where she compares Maloney to Mussolini. So she puts out a picture that's a mock-up of the two of them together. Now, Maloney takes some issue and writes back to her on Twitter. And this journalist writes back and says, well, you don't scare me, essentially. Come at me, you're only 1.2 metres tall. I can't even see you. Now, Maloney is very short. If you look at her on the world stage, amongst a cast of also very short world leaders at the moment. The recently departed Rishi Sunak, Emmanuel Macron is short. Even Ursula von der Leyen's not that tall. Maloney is a pipsqueak compared to all of them. But be careful what you say, because Maloney took real exception to that part and took this journalist to court. Georgina, she won. She won because the court deemed that calling her 1.2 metres, estimates of her actual height varied from about 1.4 metres to 1.63, which is what I am, which is not that short. It's average height, so I'd say Maloney is a bit shorter than me. And the court deemed that this was body shaming and ordered this journalist to pay Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, €5,000 because she was upset that someone called her 1.2 metres tall.
I love that story. Absolutely love it. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that she should take the time and actually be bothered to do that, right?
That you would care. But this, of course, is set against a more worrying backdrop in Italy of a view that Meloni's government and her party in particular are anti the press. They don't deal with press they don't like. So there is a serious kind of subtext to what it seems as a kind of hilarious, somewhat baffling joke of a story in this court ruling. Now, this journalist can appeal, and Maloney has said she'll donate any money that she receives from this ruling to charity. But nevertheless, an insight into what is an insult. Not Mussolini, just being short.
Italy, of course, is filling up with holidaymakers. Many, many Brits heading off to Tuscany and various other locations. And I want to talk about holidays and particularly having stuff to do there, because this hospitality brand, Scorpios Mykonos, was founded in 2015 with the aim of creating a new kind of beach experience that prioritises gastronomy, architecture, design, music and visual art. So their cultural art programme, Encounters, begins this month, and it'll showcase artworks and video installations and live performances in both Mykonos and Bodrum in Turkey. Also joining me now to tell us about this year's Encounters is the co-founder, Thomas Heyne. Thomas, welcome to Monocle on Saturday.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
Tell us about Scorpios.
Look, Scorpios was created in 2015, and we wanted to change a little bit the club scene, especially like the beach club scene. We wanted to bring everything from inside to outside, from late night clubbing to a whole day into the early night experience, dancing in the sand. People are coming for the music, not for the DJ. And I think the biggest change was like to combine socializing and partying with well-being. And, we brought all these alternative healing methods from Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. And we created a completely new experience. And on the other side, our design style. I think everybody in 2015, when we started with Scorpios, was talking about bohemian chic and wabi-sabi and this, but not one place was really like designed like this. And I think Scorpios was the first really bohemian chic designed place in this world.
And I mean, absolutely brilliant to set yourself up in two premium holiday destinations. So tell us about Encounters, which will be running in those places.
Look, when we set up our concept, like the whole idea was to create like an ancient Greek agora. And an agora in ancient Greece was like the market space where everything was happening. Judge was done, party, food, the philosophers were talking and stuff like this. So we wanted to bring this to our times, and we created a lot of pillars, like core pillars, which is food, beverage, music, and stuff like this. But also like our what I said before, our well-being, and we also had like also an eye on art, and but it was very difficult for us as a leisure kind of place to involve art, like that it's not like demanding or like too sophisticated in a way, and we didn't want to place now statues and paintings all over the place, which would have not made sense. So we were always looking for the right approach, like how we could get like an art approach, and on the other side we had like a commercially a very big success, and all the, let's say, the more sophisticated things were like going more in the background because more and more people were coming. So we were looking for a tool how we could introduce our more sophisticated doing to the world, and we created this platform, Encounters, which like every time when we do something new, we experiment with something, we put it in our counter. And this is, like the way of presenting it the first time. And we try to do it very, very, like deep and sophisticated. And that's the idea behind it.
So tell us then, if we were to be in Mykonos or Bodrum this summer, what would we see on Encounters?
You would have seen yesterday, Joseph Klibanski, who created like a digital art piece, the Tree of Life, which is the first time that the whole is a digital wall picked with sensors. So like we can monitor the wind, the temperature, we can monitor how long people are looking to the art piece, where do they look to, what time of the day they do, how is the music influencing all this kind of stuff. This goes all to a blockchain, and this makes our Tree of Life growing. And this is a project which is now 4 days to from last Thursday till next Sunday here. And you can buy their like prints from Joseph. That's the first thing what we're gonna do. Then we have Random International, which is more like digital, like something like what you would see in Mega Blue or Data Land or stuff like this in Bodrum in our temple. And this will happen in August. And in September, we have Swan Shung. I hope that this is the right way how to spell her. This is one of my favorite artists. She is painting with robots. So she is connected with two robot arms with her brain. And through her thinkings, they are painting together amazing art pieces. And this will happen in September, from the 5th to the 8th of September in Bodrum also.
This all sounds absolutely wonderful. And of course, what this is also doing is as you said, having a bit of a focus on wellness. And you're also planting trees for every artwork sold.
Exactly. For every artwork we plant 1,000 trees in Brazil. And I hope this helps change the world a little bit.
Thomas, thank you very much indeed. That's Thomas Heyne. He's from Scorpios, and their encounters happens in Mykonos and in Bodrum this summer. And it sounds just a real blast. I mean, Latika, talking about wellness on holiday, at one point, you go on holiday not to think about wellness at all. You go on holiday to drink and eat far too much. But of course, that's changing. And we're having a look at this story about Germany, where, of course, people go there to drink a lot of beer. That's one of the things that certainly used to be a priority, perhaps, if you were going off to Germany. But Munich is having an alcohol-free beer garden.
Yes. I mean, isn't this a sign of the times, really? We know that Gen Z does not drink as much as, say, our generation's Georgina. And now I guess it is the absolute epitome of that, with Munich opening its first alcohol-free beer garden. What's the point, you might ask?
Indeed.
But they are going to sell exclusively non-alcoholic drinks. So there will be non-alcoholic wine, ciders, cocktails, blah, blah, blah. But they think that this is actually a very popular destination. I mean, the market speaks, right? You don't create these sorts of things if people don't want to come and drink booze-free alcohol in an alcohol-free zone.
Absolutely. And as you say, things are really changing. The sort of generation that's going on their first holidays now are not big drinkers or indeed smokers. They may vape or smoke weed, but alcohol is not on the agenda.
Vape.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them vape, actually.
Yeah.
I see more and more people vaping than I've ever seen.
Yeah. And of course, one of the big sort of things about holiday, and again, we're talking about Germans here. If we're going to talk about a
we
stereotype.
Love Germans. Just for the record, we adore you all.
But it's towels.
But you do have some quirky characteristics, shall we say, that are noticed when one travels. This happened to me in India earlier this year. I was travelling with two British girlfriends, Georgina, and we went down to the beach, and lo and behold, there are actually lots of empty sun lounges. So we grabbed 3 and overcame a very bossy group of 5 German women and angrily rounded on us, saying, "Didn't you notice our towels were on those seats? They are ours. We came down first thing in the morning to put our towels on these seats." Now, we had just seen them at the breakfast buffet, so we knew they had not been sitting on those lounges all morning. We all kind of got there at the same time. But no, turns out if you get up at 8 a.m, you have some exclusive right if you place your towel there. Well, I think the Spanish have maybe got this down pat, because they're introducing €250 fines on a particular beach in Costa Blanca Beach. Georgina, if you try and do this. So if you try and reserve a space on a lounger with your towel, you're going to get slapped with a €250 fine. So I think this is the German tax, isn't it?
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
What, do you do it?
I just could not imagine ever wanting to go on holiday to a place where there was that much competition for some poolside space.
Well, the beach I was at in India it was only about 12 spaces. So sometimes I guess the more exclusive you are, the more it can invite this sort of behaviour.
I suppose. So what's been the reaction to this? Let's have a look at this story. People are quite cross about it. It says it's not aimed at tourists. We live off tourism here, but it is to try and stop people bagging those sun lounges. They do this while the cleaners are cleaning up the beaches. And there's a lot of footage on social media showing tourists in Spain queuing outside hotel gates before racing to reserve poolside lounges first thing in the morning.
That sounds like a second hell, doesn't it?
Really, it's like kind of rushing to the front at a concert or whatever as soon as the gates open.
Yeah, no, it's not
the opposite of relaxing on holiday.
It's not for me. But look, it is for a lot of people. And I'm very much of a first in, best dressed kind of girl. I'm also, I guess, probably in favour of maybe 1 to 2 hours max. I mean, I actually don't mind the system in, is it Italy? As in Puglia last year. And, you know, it's a kind of formalised process to get a sunbed and you pay a thing and people bring you over drinks. Now, interestingly, they tried to do this on Bondi Beach in Australia. I cannot tell you the absolute backlash to even a suggestion that you would commercialise the sand and that you would then charge people to come and sit on something raised above the sand. In Australia, it is absolutely the case that the sand, the sun and the waves are free for you to use.
I mean, that's really interesting because in Italy, it's the other way. I mean, those beach clubs.
We would never do this.
I've got a favourite one in Forza de Mami and it's just it's a lovely beach club and you know once you've paid the huge amount of money to get in, everything will be there for you, which is great.
See, I'm kind of, I don't mind this European thing. But in Australia, honestly, if you tried it, I think it would be honestly the way Starbucks went when it tried to introduce in Australia. I mean, it was packed up shop. And no one goes to Starbucks in Australia. We have proper decent coffee. So trying to do European beaches in Australia, no way, Jose.
Latika, I am going to let you go and get your hair braided.
Thank you. It's going to take a long time. 3 hours, I think, and 2 women braiding my hair.
And you're going to channel your inner Alicia Keys.
Yes, I'll send you a photo.
Oh, please do. Letitia Bourke, thank you very much indeed. Thanks also to Thomas Heyne, who joined us, talking to us about Scorpios Mykonos and Bodrum, and also thanks to our producer and studio engineer, Lily Austin. That's all for Monocle on Saturday, which will return at the same time next weekend. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thanks for listening.